it doesn't seem like this I don't know, the Apple shares that aren't moving much on this. The larger questions, I think, are still probably just China and demand.
Agreed 100%. Like this, like it looks like maybe Biden is trying to thaw relationships with China. That's best for Apple and Disney, who have big operations in China. Each of them are about 20% of their revenue on Apple's side and 20% of theme park revenue for Disney. So it'd be really great if we didn't go to war either figuratively or literally with China.
So it's interesting you say that because obviously the president's been in Vietnam. He was just in India. Lately, he's been corralling allies like Korea and others and Japan to kind of form this. It looks like, unfortunately, the U.S. is preparing for a more tense future with China. You know, it has these agreements with India to kind of build out its own, I don't want to call it Belt and Road, but kind of to push back a little bit. So where and how should we read the signals that you think the administration, and maybe it's Raimondo's trip and more to come, is trying to thaw things?
I think what they're trying to say is they're going to make these countries choose, right? They're going to put them in a position of, look, if you want to do business with the U.S., which is the 20% of global GDP, you need to keep open. You need to be friendly with the U.S. So they're not going to allow them to take China's side. So, and I think that just negotiates from a position of strength because both China and America understand that they're worth more together than opposed to one another. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what they're trying to do is get these traditional, like regional allies of China into the U.S. basket of closer relations.
And one more, and then I want to bring Steve in, Laura. But when we lay out kind of your bear case on Apple, one leg of the stool seems to be China, another weak consumer demand. Maybe you can add to that. What do you think kind of the biggest concerns are for you with the stock?
So, yeah, definitely the China demand, which would near term threaten 20% of their revenue now that Apple isn't allowed to bring their devices into government offices in China anymore. But secondly, more importantly to me, this generative AI, large language models, my opinion is over the next decade, almost every business is going to have to integrate generative AI to either lower its costs or to drive its revenue. So, of course, Meta and Apple will do that for themselves. But who's going to make money are the arms dealers in the cloud. So that's AWS, Amazon, that's Google's 3 large language models over at Alphabet, and it's Microsoft with OpenAI. So those are going to be the backbone of American business, in my opinion, in the next 10 years. And they get the benefit of charging, let's say, a 30% tax on every revenue dollar of every business in America.
True.
Apple does not.
That's really interesting. Okay, so Steve, one of the things that made me think twice was an investor I follow, Vitaly Katzenelson, wrote in the past week or so about how bullish he is on, kid you not, Apple's new headset. Because he said, unlike the kind of Meta offering, which is sealed off from the world and more of a pure VR offering, Apple's is more AR. It's augmented reality. It even simulates your eyes so that if you and I were talking and I'm wearing it, I could kind of pretend, exactly. you could feel like you're talking to me. So is Apple with this headset potentially going to be able to capitalize on the next wave for product demand, much like it has with the iPhone for the past 15 years?
Yeah, if they do, Kelly, it's going to take a long time. Look, I used the Vision Pro when Apple unveiled it earlier this summer, back in June. And look, it's very similar in theory and concept, just not in execution, as what Meta already has. They have their own Pro headset that feature, if you go down by the specs of what it can do, they're very similar devices. Apple just executed it better. The visuals are better. The hand tracking is better. The eye tracking is better. What you just said about having that sense of presence in the room is a lot better. But it's also $3,500. It's not coming out till next year. It's going to be incredibly limited availability at first. U.S. only, Apple stores only, before they expand from there. So if it does take off, it's going to take quite a bit. It's not going to be with this first version, though, Kelly.
Final word, Steve, as we turn back to tomorrow's event, which is much more just about the iPhone refresh. I mean, these events typically are a bearish catalyst for Apple and for its suppliers for some period of time.
Yeah, usually what we see, I think we saw Apple shares up about 1%. I don't know where we're at now, but look, this always happens before an iPhone event, the buy the rumor, sell the news type of thing. But the real thing I think everyone watching now should be looking out for is whether or not these rumors about a price increase actually takes place. Like we said at the top of this segment, Tim Cook actually told me this himself last month, that demand, especially in the U.S. for smartphones, is just falling. And so to make up for that, do they feel like they can raise prices on those Pro phones? We know people are willing to pay more for those Pro phones. We know last year year, they couldn't make enough of those Pro phones to sell to people, so maybe they can carry that over this year. So that's going to be the thing to watch more so than anything the gadgets can do themselves.